There are now over 100 US cities with smart city initiatives in progress, as well as global cities that are working on all kinds of smart city initiatives, which TechRepublic's been covering for several years. With us today, we have one of the leaders in smart cities in the US, Dr. Ted Smith, who was the former Chief Innovation Officer of the city of Louisville. We're going to talk about all the different things that cities are trying to tackle that get encompassed in smart cities. So Ted, when people say smart cities, it can mean all kinds of things, from cybersecurity to your water treatment facility to better streets. So what are some of the things that have impressed you the most in terms of the categories that are really making a difference for citizens?
Sure, it's a great question, and thank you for having me here. Broadly speaking, the kinds of things that smart cities do are not anything different than really what cities do. And so if you really look at some of the greatest work that's been done to date, it's often it's technologies coming in to make existing systems work better or deliver new capabilities around things that you think of as your existing city services. So for example, mobility, everything around transportation planning, transportation logistics, the real-time running of transportation, early beneficiary by far, because if you take the IoT work, sensing essentially dynamic patterns of traffic, if you can turn that into active traffic management, because that's the role for the city to play, if you can do the macro work, which is these roads are going to be closed in the next 3 days, and get ahead of real-time traffic, this is really the future. I mean, in many respects, city planning turns into city managing, where you're able to plan your city in the immediate future, not in the 10-year horizon. So you see a lot in transportation mobility, you see a lot in health, you see a lot in public safety, any solid waste management, areas where there's potentially waste in the system, where providing a little information can change the way you allocate resources, can improve the predictability and responsiveness for citizens so that they feel like they understand how their city works because they're sort of programming it, if you will, with you.
So how much is this also about saving money? Because you put sensors on things, all of a sudden you mentioned efficiencies. You can find places where you had inefficiencies that you had no visibility into.
Right.
Now you can understand them. Now you can automate them better. Now you can save money. Is that one of the big justifications for doing these projects?
Well, certainly the vendors that sell smart city solutions are, they work hard to build cases that say, look at all the time and money you waste in inefficient management of these resources. The reality, as a guy who's worked for a mayor, it's not as if you're going to redeploy a lot of those resources to something else. And so a lot of the, sort of inside baseball on smart cities is getting beyond simply a cost-saving proposition and balancing cost savings with value creation. So for example, in all the smart lighting projects, everyone that I'm familiar with also has the sort of a mesh network kind of public Wi-Fi opportunity or a public security opportunity, video surveillance, whatever. Those are new capabilities that you never expected from your light pole investment. And if changing your lighting buys you new services, then that's in many ways a much more powerful argument than I'm going to cut your electricity bill. And so I think this is where the creative geniuses in smart cities do their best work, and it's to figure out what the platform looks like rather than what the point solution looks like.
So I've heard you say before that for a lot of these problems in cities, that there's just a starvation of imagination, and that sort of gets to what you're saying is, don't just think about putting in a new light pole that has LED that's going to save you money. Think about, you can now rent that pole to the carriers, and now they're paying you for access to be able to put their wireless and be able to spread out and get better coverage. And those are the kinds of cities that I think impress you the most when they're being creative with their solutions. Are there others, things like that are really moving the ball forward?
Yeah, so I mean, another in that same camp way to think about it is it's how you pay for things. In the old model, you would say, what's your city budget? What can you pay for? And if getting extra leverage out of that public dollar is possible, that's a great thing. But I think we're increasingly seeing public-private partnerships be a new recipe. And so instead of kind of saying, well, how much money do I have in my parks budget and what can I do to my parks? Increasingly, you see other sort of private operators come in and say, well, I'd be willing to share some of that cost if I can do the following extra things. And if that's how we get the service for citizens, I personally don't see a lot of downside. And I like the creative financial brainstorming that gets you to something that might not otherwise ever happen as strictly a public procurement thing. So creativity on all fronts, technology, financing, citizen engagement. I mean, this is where we get new solutions.
Very good. Dr. Ted, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, smart cities, it's the topic that is driving a lot of innovation in today's public infrastructure. Digital transformation for the public sector, as we often call it. Subscribe to our Smart Cities newsletter to follow the latest.